Hello and welcome. I am Zerbraxi, part-time zombie breeder, part-time gunpowder mixer. Last year the Resident Evil 2 remake came out and it just blew the world away. It was considered some of the best of its genre and nominated for countless Game of the Year recommendations. However, today we're going to talk about its new version, Resident Evil 3 Remake, which is a sequel that's actually a prequel to the 2 remake, which is also a sequel to the original prequel's sequel. What? Resident Evil 3 Remake is a survival horror retelling of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. RE3 is actually my favorite of the original trilogy. It's changed to focus just slightly more on action and tension rather than horror. In my opinion, Resident Evil 3 was a perfect middle ground between RE2 and 4 in terms of atmosphere. Full disclosure, I'm more of a casual fan of the Resident Evil franchise, so understand that going into this video. I really do enjoy these games, but I've only ever really played them through maybe once or twice, so know that this review of the remake will be from that perspective. Also know that I will not be talking about any story spoilers in this review. I may critique aspects of the plot, but I'll do my best to leave key details out so no one's experience is ruined here. Out of the gate, the first thing you'll notice about RE3 Remake is its presentation. It's truly jaw-dropping just how impressive this game looks. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is the only thing I can think of that pushes the graphical fidelity quite as much as this, and in some ways I'd say that Resident Evil 3 looks even better. Genuinely, no exaggeration here, I was continually in awe at how damn good this game presents itself. If you have a way to play this game in HDR, 4K, and 60 plus FPS, it is so worth it. In fact, this is the first game that's ever convinced me to record footage in 4K 60 FPS for this review because of how stunningly beautiful it is. The light emitting from every source looks so good, and it almost provides this real feeling of sanctuary. Jill Valentine's model and the damage her body takes along the journey just looks immaculate. The real pinnacle of graphical accomplishment, though, is easily Carlos's hair. Every time it's on screen, it steals the scene and provides the player with some real comfort in this zombie apocalypse. I just want to touch it, please. And speaking of the zombie apocalypse, the zombies look as gross as ever. The human zombies especially have this decaying, pale design. The look of necrosis as their decaying bodies stagger at you is truly horrifying and rides that edge of realism and fantasy. It's design choices like this that adds a level of fear during the entire playtime. Take the hunter betas, for example, creatures that act animalistic and have this hard shell on their body. When you damage them, the sound and animation that happens when the carapace comes ripping off the skin is so disturbing, yet satisfying. Certain levels of the immersion can be attributed to the insanely beautiful graphics RE3R portrays, and it makes a really good argument for how important graphical fidelity in video games can be at times. To move past the game's visuals for a moment, let's shoot right to the gameplay. That's a gun pun. There's a lot of good, but also some intense frustration in this department. Let's start with the good. You'll be able to play as both Jill Valentine and Carlos through the main campaign. Each of their sections air on slightly different styles of combat. Jill's sections tend to be a bit more of what you'd expect from your traditional survival horror genre. For most of the game, Jill will be equipped with a pistol, a shotgun, and a grenade launcher. Each of these weapons tend to have very little ammo, but pack a mean punch. Carlos, on the other hand, starts with the same above weapons, but swaps the grenade launcher for the assault rifle. This deals way less damage than the grenade launcher, but without nearly the same amount of limited ammo, it's way more forgiving of a weapon in terms of resources. Shooting your weapon in Resident Evil 3 is incredibly inaccurate. If you don't take your sweet time lining up your shots, you're going to miss a lot and end up running dry on ammunition, leaving you with nothing but dodging and your knife. In order to gain a more accurate shot, you can stop moving, and the reticle will close in and allow for more accurate aim. There's real beauty in this, as in order to be more accurate and conservative, you have to leave yourself in more tense situations. And considering ammo is relatively rare as it is, it adds a whole new layer of risk-reward gameplay. Even bigger than that, it also creates this excessive tension at times when several zombies are coming at you, but you must remain planted in order to best deal with them. Granted, there is other equipment like hand grenades and flashbangs that can be used to deal with multiple undead at once, but these resources are incredibly rare. You'll find some weapon upgrades along the way, like a butt stock or a red dot sight, for example, but these changes are pretty minimal and not even worth mentioning beyond that. The camera stays really tight to Jill and Carlos's back. The camera never really gets in the way, which is good, and it tends to serve mostly as a way to increase tension by limiting vision. Despite the game's design towards more action than its predecessor, all of the above mechanics force you to take your time around every corner. It became common practice for me to open a door, immediately check every corner around me, and look for zombies on the floor and ceiling as well. Even though I approached every room way too cautiously, I still got scared a few times. Moments like this where this Hunter Beta just came out from nowhere behind me literally made me drop my controller. That, or this moment where I'm just in a room, minding my own business, gathering, and holy shit, where did you come from? Oh, that first time that happened, horrifying. Sometimes actively restricting the player in certain ways can be great game design, and the way this camera limitation works in RE3 is a great example of this. There are two major pieces of frustration that I do have with the Resident Evil 3 combat though. The first frustration is actually a blessing in disguise, but the second just annoyed me through the entire game. First up is the zombies and how unpredictable they move. I mentioned earlier that bullets are far and few between, which makes missing your shots an infuriating experience. It only makes matters worse that the zombies move in this lumbering and erratic manner. There feels like there is no perceivable pattern as the head and limbs sway all over while this flesh-hungry undead makes its way to you. This enforces that gameplay style I mentioned earlier where you must plant your feet and stay calm during these tense situations. On top of that, because the zombies' weak points like the head can be hard to hit, sometimes it's best to not go for the kill, but instead just subdue. You can shoot zombies in the legs to remove their mobility, which lets you then escape around them easier. That, or you sacrifice more bullets, but just shooting body shots for the safe route. See, this frustration that occurs when you miss a shot at these creatures matches the anger you'd feel in real life if you missed such an important shot when your life was on the line. A lot of people have said Resident Evil and Silent Hill's combat isn't fun, and it's not supposed to be. I have always found this to be a terrible excuse for bad game design. While the tank controls in the original RE3 were awful, and the combat was nothing special, I think the combat here is actually superb. The game isn't trying to make it not fun so you avoid combat. It's trying to put you in the same mindset you would be if this was real. This design forces the player's hands to decide what's more important to them, clearing this zombie now, or saving your resources for later. The combat is fun and incredibly well designed. Everything feels tight and rewarding. Despite that though, the game wants you to know that sometimes it's best to just avoid combat entirely, and you're still prepared for challenges coming up ahead. Now, for the second frustration, the dodging. So Resident Evil 3 gave Jill a dodge move in order to kick up the action from the limited mobility in Resident Evil 2. On top of being able to dodge with Jill, and this shoulder check thing Carlos does, there's also a perfect dodge if you nail it. Well, perfectly. I really couldn't come up with anything better than that, really? That was the best thing I can come? Alright, good. Good writing. When you perform a perfect dodge, time slows down for a couple seconds and locks your reticle onto the target's weak point.
And you attack its weak point for massive damage.
Essentially, dodging is an incredibly valuable mechanic for both engaging and avoiding combat. So, where does the frustration come in? Dodging is extremely unreliable. For a while, I thought I was just getting the timing wrong, so I actively spent time trying to get the timing down more and more. Every time I thought I had it figured out, I'd bump into a zombie, nail the dodge the same as always, and... How? I seriously don't get it. So there's a sound cue that comes from the zombie that does help indicate when the correct time to dodge is, but even that didn't seem to work half the time. Even if you dodge under a zombie's arms, sometimes the zombie just throws your character into the animation of being bitten, despite the fact that your character model and the zombies never touched. Dodging backward away from enemies seems a bit more reliable, but dodging past them always felt like complete randomness. And I know this isn't just me in this game, because I recently came off another Capcom game where dodging is incredibly important, Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and I can nail every dodge all day, every day in that game. Yet here, even when I feel 100% confident that I nailed the dodge perfectly... So, I haven't talked about Nemesis yet, and here's why. Despite the fact this game is a remake, I'm trying to judge it on its own merits in as many ways as possible, just as Final Fantasy VII Remake deserves to be judged on its own as well. However, despite my best intentions there, it's almost impossible to separate a remake from its original entirely. So far, I think everything I've discussed about Resident Evil 3 Remake is better than its 1999 original. That is, until Nemesis. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot about this new Nemesis I like. Throughout the game, this seemingly unstoppable super soldier known as Nemesis will show up and chase you. While it is possible to subdue him at parts, and you are rewarded for doing so, you can't just step up and win against him. He is seriously uncontainable. Even when you think you're going to outrun him, he'll just leap across the level and land right in front of you. These moments throughout the game will fill you with sheer dread. There's something awesomely terrifying about having something running after you that you can almost do nothing about. This is amplified even further, as the boss fights with Nemi show just how much it takes to merely hold him off, never mind try to kill him. Everything about the concept of Nemesis is still just as good now as it was 20 years ago. And yet, something feels off. Nemesis feels so underutilized in the remake. I know his appearances in the original were scripted, but the moments felt more organic. Granted, it's been a while since I played the original game, so I am going off of memory here. While Nemesis felt like such a threat every moment he was around, it also just feels as if he's not actually around that much in the remake. I was worried this was just me misremembering the original game I played so long ago, but considering how many hardcore Resi 3 fans have been saying similar things, I don't think it's just nostalgia talking. While I mentioned earlier that the boss fights showcase how insanely powerful Nemesis is, most of the fights aren't actually any good. The first encounter on the rooftop is super intense and claustrophobic, and really showcases this creature's power, but the rest just seem silly and designed to be more of a spectacle than scary or intimidating. The final boss fight especially, which I won't show because of spoilers, is super underwhelming, and it boils down to essentially a crappy sequence of pressing X a couple times. Outside boss fights, when Nemesis is around, the game is at its best, but it's a shame that he's used so sparingly. Too sparingly, I would say. My final thoughts on Resident Evil 3 Remake is that this is a pretty dang good game. It's a great blend of survival horror and action. The experience is tense, scary, but also awesome. This is without a doubt one of the best looking games of the generation, and that only amplifies everything to new heights. Despite my complaints about Nemesis and the dodge mechanic, what exists here is a real joy. Unfortunately, I finished the game in about 5 hours. Look, I'm not typically one to actually complain about game length too much, as long as the title does a couple things. If a game is so unique, like Ninja Blade or Undertale, then a short game can be completely fine, even if it's a full-price AAA title. RE3 Remake, though, well, the entire game actually just feels incomplete. Even if you've never played the original, which is already longer than this game is, I strongly believe that you'll feel like something is missing. A lot of the back part of the story is wrapped up way too fast. Nemesis feels super underutilized, as I mentioned before, and more areas with him, or leading up to him, could have done the game a whole ton of good. Resident Evil 2 Remake had a lot of things cut from that game, but the package still felt like a complete experience. The Resident Evil 3 Remake is really, really good in many ways, but charging full price for 5 hours worth of content just isn't acceptable for a AAA title. Despite the fact that many will argue Resident Evil is about multiple playthroughs, this just won't be the case for the majority of the people who play this game. Most players of any game will be the casual players who just enjoy the franchise and will beat the game once and move on. Just as Nier Automata is about multiple playthroughs, even beating it just the one time through feels like a fulfilling experience. I think overall, Resident Evil 3 Remake is a really good game, but it desperately needed more time to add some content into the package. Imagine this game as a 9 to 10 hour experience and how much better that would be. I know a lot of people would just say, well, any game with more content is better, so this criticism is irrelevant. I genuinely disagree with that sentiment. If Persona 5 had more content, that would be better for sure, but it doesn't need it. Sure, Rise of the Tomb Raider could have been even better with another 5 hours, but 15 was pretty good time for my first playthrough, and the game felt complete regardless of how I wanted more. The biggest fault is that when the credits rolled for Resident Evil 3 Remake, my honest reaction was, wait, is that it? At the end of the day, I really, really liked the game. I can't recommend it at full price. If you ever see it go on sale for 20 or 30 bucks, then I'd highly recommend trying it. It's a really unique experience and fun one that you'll definitely have from start to finish. What do you think? Have you finished the game already and you have agreements or disagreements with me? Have you not played the game? Have you found this video informational or entertaining? Fun stuff, etc., etc. If you enjoyed the video, please thumbs up, thumbs down, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff that everyone asks you to do. Please, I appreciate it. If you do want to have a conversation in the comments below, I do reply to every comment that I get, so please do so. Besides that, I've been Zerbraxi, you've been awesome, and I'll see you on the other side.